Why your grandchild is calm with their parents but melts down at your house can feel confusing. It may seem personal, but it's often a subconscious response to a different environment. Watch until the end to discover the hidden psychological trigger driving these tantrums and how a subtle shift in your routine can completely restore the peace. Let's start right there at your front door. You've been looking forward to this visit all week, maybe all month. Your grandchild arrives, and for the first hour, everything is fine. You're playing, you're laughing, you're doing all the things grandparents do. And then, something shifts. A snack goes wrong, a toy disappears. You say it's time for bed, and suddenly this same child, their parents swear is an angel at home, absolutely loses it. You're standing there wondering what you did. You're wondering if you said something wrong. You're wondering if there's something about your house, your rules, your voice, something that's breaking this child down in a way their parents never seem to experience. Here's the thing, you didn't do anything wrong. It's entirely typical for a child to behave better for others than they do for the people closest to them. Frustrating but completely normal. But normal doesn't mean it's random. There are specific documented reasons why your grandchild falls apart at your house. And once you understand them, the meltdowns start to make a different kind of sense. The first thing to understand is this: your grandchild isn't melting down at you. They're melting down with you. There's a difference, and it's a crucial one. Kids push boundaries, have meltdowns, and behave so much worse around the people they feel safe and secure with. According to licensed psychologist Crystal I. Lee, who has spent 15 years working with children and their parents. Think about what that means for a moment. The meltdown isn't a sign that something is broken between you and your grandchild. It's actually a sign that something is working, that your grandchild feels secure enough around you to completely fall apart. Lee puts it this way: think about your own behavior. You probably act more put together and formal around strangers because you're not sure how they'll react to you. But around your friends and family, you're your true, authentic self and feel safe that they love you. Even if you're having an off day, your grandchild is doing exactly the same thing. Now, here's where it gets more specific for grandparents, because the picture at your house is different from the picture at mom or dad's house, and that difference matters. Grandparents usually provide unconditional love and emotional warmth without strict rules or constant discipline, which helps children feel safe and accepted. Parents, on the other hand, are responsible for setting boundaries and enforcing rules, which can make the relationship more demanding. Grandparents tend to be more patient, less strict, and more willing to indulge children, making their presence associated with comfort and happiness. So your house has already been filed in your grandchild's brain as the safe and happy place, which sounds like a compliment, and it is. But that same filing system means their guard is completely down at your house in a way it simply isn't at home. At home, there's a routine. There are expectations that have been rehearsed thousands of times. There's a rhythm that the child's nervous system has mapped completely. At your house, the map is different. The rules might be different. The food is different. The bedtime might be different. Even the furniture is different. Research has found that children's behavior varies depending on whether their mothers or grandparents are present. Children can't effectively control their emotions and tend to show more irritability or moodiness in front of their grandparents. That's not an accident. That's not bad parenting by the parents. And it's not bad grandparenting by you. That's a child whose emotional regulation system is being asked to operate in unfamiliar territory, with fewer guardrails, in the one place where they feel the least pressure to hold it together. Learning to regulate emotions is a complex process. According to psychologist Pamela Cole of Penn State University, emotion regulation calls on so many skills, including attention, planning, cognitive development, and language development. And here's the kicker: children are still building all of those skills. They haven't finished. So when the environment shifts, when the routine is off, when the usual cues aren't there, the regulation system is the first thing to go. That's your grandchild on your kitchen floor. That's a developing brain running out of coping tools in an environment that feels wonderful but unfamiliar. Children develop those skills at different times, and their ability to manage negative feelings depends on genetics, their natural temperament, the environment they grow up in, and outside factors like how tired or hungry they are. Tired and hungry. Two words every grandparent knows. And they matter enormously here, because visits to Grandma and Grandpa's house tend to involve later bedtimes, more sugar, more stimulation, and more excitement than a regular Tuesday at home. By the time the meltdown hits, your grandchild has often been running on an almost empty tank for hours, and you just happened to be there when it ran out. Now that we know the meltdown itself is rooted in safety, let's go deeper on what that actually means, because the psychology here is more layered than it first appears. There's a concept in developmental psychology called attachment theory, and it's been the backbone of child development research for decades. The idea is straightforward. Children build emotional bonds with the adults who care for them, and those bonds shape how children behave, especially under stress. According to attachment theory, secure attachment refers to a stable, warm, and responsive emotional bond between a child and their caregiver. This attachment helps the child develop what's called a secure internal working model, the way they perceive themselves, others, and the world. A secure internal working model is characterized by the belief that the child is worthy and lovable, and that others are dependable and supportive in times of need. This sense of security enables children to better regulate their emotions and navigate challenges. Now here's where grandparents fit into this picture. Grandparents aren't just background characters in a child's emotional life. They're genuine attachment figures. Attachment is developed in the first few years of childhood, and children may have more than one attachment figure, like parents or grandparents. Research examining infants' behavior in play separation situations found that mothers and grandmothers were treated almost interchangeably by young children, while strangers were treated as strangers. That's significant. Your grandchild's nervous system doesn't see you as a distant relative. It sees you as a core safe person. And with core safe people, children do something very specific. They use them as what researchers call a secure base. The child uses an attachment figure as a secure base to explore the world, and also uses that attachment figure to seek comfort in times of stress. That last phrase is everything. In times of stress. Your grandchild is seeking comfort in times of stress, and at your house, the stress can be as small as a cup of juice that wasn't the right color, or a nap being 2 hours later than usual. Because the emotional regulation tank is already low, the threshold for stress drops dramatically. And because you're the safe base, you get the full emotional download. Their parents get this too. By the way, this is not exclusive to grandparents, but there are a few specific layers at play in your house that amplify it. Grandparents often have more time to listen, play, and engage with children, fulfilling their emotional need for attention and security. In some cases, children may turn to their grandparents as a form of emotional compensation if parents are busy or under stress. That emotional role, the compensation role, is actually a gift you're giving your grandchild. But it also means that when they arrive at your door, they may already be carrying more emotional weight than you realize. If it's been a stressful week at home, if mom and dad have been overwhelmed, if there's been tension in the house, your grandchild walks in carrying all of that. And because you're the safe base, they put it all down the moment they feel secure enough. The profound impact of positive and secure relationships between children and primary caregivers on children's lives is well acknowledged. When children experience supportive and warm relationships during their early childhood, they develop a sense of security. The meltdown, then, isn't the failure of that secure relationship. It's actually the proof of it. Your grandchild trusts you enough to fall apart in front of you. That's not a small thing, but understanding the emotional trust factor is only one piece of the story. Because there's a second layer running underneath all of this, one that has less to do with feelings and more to do with rules. Specifically, whose rules are in play and what happens to a child's brain when those rules keep changing. When grandparents provide regular childcare, it's not uncommon for tension, conflict, and disagreement to occur between grandparents and parents. And these dynamics can negatively impact children's social, emotional, and behavioral development. When a child senses that the adults around them aren't operating from the same rule book, something interesting happens. They start testing every single rule to figure out which ones still apply. That testing looks a lot like defiance. It feels a lot like a meltdown. Here's a scenario that will feel familiar to a lot of grandparents. Your grandchild's parents have a rule: no screens before dinner. You don't see the harm in a little TV while you get the food ready. You flip it on. The child watches. Dinner comes. The TV goes off, and the child goes sideways. Because now they're in a house where the rule was no screens, and suddenly the rule is yes screens, and then back to no screens, all in the span of 45 minutes. That back and forth isn't just inconvenient. It's genuinely confusing to a child's developing brain. Children are easily able to differentiate between varying expectations of their behavior in different settings. Just as there may be one rule for home and one for school, children are able to expertly navigate between different sets of rules and parenting styles. But there's a catch. Navigating different rules takes cognitive effort. And in a child who is already tired, already stimulated, already running low on emotional regulation fuel, that extra cognitive effort can be the thing that breaks the dam. Research has found that a positive grandparent-parent co-parenting relationship is associated with fewer problem behaviors and higher levels of self-control and social skills in children. In contrast, negative intergenerational co-parenting is related to problem behaviors and dependent behaviors, as well as lower levels of social competence. The word negative in that research doesn't necessarily mean hostile. It can just mean inconsistent. Two sets of adults who love the same child and simply do things differently. And that inconsistency, even when it's well-intentioned, lands in the child's nervous system as noise. Grandparent co-parenting consistency appears to facilitate the development of self-control behaviors in children. Consistency. That word comes up over and over again in the research because a child's self-regulation, their ability to manage their own emotions and impulses, is built on predictability. Predictability is the scaffolding. When the scaffolding is different at every location, the child has to keep rebuilding it from scratch. For kids who are struggling to learn emotion regulation, consistency is key. Psychologist John Lockman has said it's really important for parents, grandparents, teachers, and other caregivers to work together. To address a child's self-regulation problems, to sit down and plan a coordinated approach to handling the child's behaviors. Now here's where grandparents face a genuinely difficult position, because the research also says clearly that grandparents aren't parents. You're not supposed to be parents. You didn't sign up to be parents again. You've earned your role, and that role has different energy, different warmth, and different expectations than the parenting role does. Cookies for breakfast, staying up late, and maybe a little more television than usual. For some families, what happens at grandma's house stays at grandma's house. But for others, clashes over parenting choices and enforcing parents' rules can cause major strife between a child's parents and grandparents. And that strife has a direct line into the child's behavior. If grandparents tend to indulge grandchildren with sugary treats, lots of toys, or permission to bend the rules, that behavior can have serious consequences. Not because treats are evil, and not because bending a rule here and there destroys a child, but because the pattern, over time, starts to communicate something to the child. It communicates that the adults in their life have different values about what they deserve and what they're allowed to do. And a child who's picked up on that message doesn't just enjoy the extra cookies. They start pushing every boundary to test which version of the world is real. Time spent with grandparents can make life more difficult for parents afterward, because they then have to try to restore the kids' more normal and healthy routines, which the children often resist adamantly. Mom and/or dad become the bad guy when they place limits on behavior and privileges. So by the time the parents walk back through your door to pick up their child, the stage is already set for a second round of meltdowns. This time on the drive home, the child is overstimulated, under-rested, and has just had 48 hours of being the center of a world with looser rules. Going home is going to feel like a punishment, even if nobody intended it to feel that way. When children have permission for their real feelings and see that those feelings are connected with loving someone, they can express them directly, which may mean begging to stay longer or even getting angry about leaving. But they won't bury their feelings and change them into something they're not, get themselves into trouble, and leave everyone dissatisfied. Now we get to the part that nobody at the family dinner table wants to say out loud. Half of parents in the United States have found themselves in a direct disagreement with a grandparent over how their child is being raised. That's not a small statistic. Different parenting styles, Generational gaps and overstepping boundaries are cited as the main causes of tension between parents and grandparents. When disagreements about parenting have occurred, 43% of parents have asked a grandparent to change their behavior. Nearly half of those say the grandparent complied, but 36% say the grandparent agreed to change and then didn't follow through. While 17% say grandparents outright refused, 17% of grandparents, when asked by their own child to respect a parenting choice, said no, and a further third of them said yes but meant no. Now, is this malicious? Almost never. Grandparents who push back on parenting rules are not as a rule trying to undermine anyone. They raised children. They have a whole archive of experience that tells them some of the current rules are excessive, or unnecessary, or different from how things were done back then, and they're not entirely wrong to feel that way. Parenting advice does shift with generations. What the science said in 1985 is not what it says now. Often it's been 10 or 20 years since grandparents had children running around the house. That gap is real. The world your grandchild is growing up in has different pressures, different research, and different expectations than the one where you raised their parent. And neither generation is completely right or completely wrong about that. One common source of tension is unsolicited parenting advice from grandparents, which can strain the grandparent-parent relationship. But here's what that tension does to the child, and this is the part that gets overlooked in almost every conversation about this topic. Inter-adult conflict among married parents, long-term partners, or grandparents and parents is an important context of the family in which children can learn adaptive and/or maladaptive ways to manage conflict. Children are watching all the time. They're watching the way the adults in their lives interact, and they're cataloging it. When grandma rolls her eyes at the no sugar rule, the child sees it. When grandpa gives the cookie anyway and says, "Don't tell your mom," the child files that away, not as a funny secret, as a signal that the adults aren't unified. And a child who senses a crack in adult authority will push every button to see how wide that crack goes. Such behavior goes far beyond spoiling. It is instead teaching grandchildren deceitfulness and a lack of respect for the parents. That's a strong statement, and it's worth sitting with, because nobody is trying to teach a grandchild to be deceitful. But the structure of what happens at grandma's stays at grandma's is, functionally, asking a child to maintain a secret from their parents. That's a complicated emotional load to put on a small person. Another way grandparents can go wrong is by comforting children. When parents are correcting them, grandparents and parents often have different ideas about how best to discipline children, and parents get to make the call, as long as discipline doesn't veer into abuse. The scenario where a parent corrects a child at your dinner table, and you immediately step in to comfort the child. That might feel like love in the moment, and it is love, but from the child's perspective, it's a green light. It tells them that when mom or dad says no, there's an appeal process, and that appeal process lives at your house. Research has shown that grandparents' authoritative parenting styles negatively predict children's anxiety, while permissive and authoritarian parenting styles exacerbate grandchildren's behavioral problems. The word permissive is the key one here. Not mean, not neglectful, just permissive. Just yes, more often than no. Just letting things slide. And even that, the research says, makes behavioral problems more likely. Understanding the collective influence of both parents and grandparents on children's behavior, particularly the impact of parenting consistency, is vital. Consistent, supportive parenting from both parents and grandparents has been shown to reduce problem behaviors, while discordant or unsupportive parenting styles are linked to adverse outcomes, including anxiety in children. So the path forward isn't about grandparents becoming stricter or more distant. It's about something far more doable: alignment. Not identical rules in every house, but a shared foundation. An agreement about what the big things are, so the child doesn't spend every visit running an experiment on which adult will bend first. The visit is over. The parents are back. Your grandchild, who was perfectly happy 2 minutes ago, is now crying and clinging and refusing to leave. Or, on the flip side, They're being rude and dismissive, and the parents are apologizing to you on the way out the door. Both of those endings are extremely common, and they both come from the same place. Kids need help to stay with their real feelings and not substitute other feelings that don't match the situation. The best way to help them is to talk about how sad it is to say goodbye when they're having so much fun and they love grandma and grandpa so much. The sadness is real, the transition is hard, and young children don't have the language or the emotional tools to process, "I'm sad because I love this person and I don't want to leave," so it comes out as crying or defiance or slamming doors. A useful tip is to try to have a plan for the next time everyone will meet. Young children don't understand time very well. Indefinite time words like soon or in a while don't mean anything to them. Concrete is better. "You'll see Grandma at Thanksgiving" means almost nothing to a 5-year-old. "You'll see Grandma in 2 Saturdays, 2 sleeps, then a weekend" means something they can hold on to. But the larger work happening here isn't just about managing the goodbye. It's about what the entire relationship between grandparents and parents looks like, and how that relationship gets modeled for the child. Because emotion regulation often occurs in multi-person contexts, it requires all parties to monitor and navigate multiple streams of emotion-laden interactions that are constantly shifting. In families with 2 caregivers, such as a grandparent and a parent, effective co-regulation of a child relies not only on each caregiver's sensitive and responsive care for the child's emotional needs, but also on the caregiver's capacity to coordinate with and support one another. Coordinate with and support one another. That's the research saying it plainly. When grandparents and parents operate as a team, not identically, but cooperatively, children's emotional regulation improves. The meltdowns reduce. The transitions get easier. Programs designed to help grandparents navigate their caregiving role spend time refamiliarizing them with why children behave the way they do. Simple prevention-based tips include making the environment at home safer. For example, moving delicate objects like vases to avoid having to say no or stop all the time. Grandparents are also encouraged to build an easy go-to list of engaging activities, possibly with input from the parents, so they don't feel constantly pressured to come up with ideas on the spot. That's a practical shift that costs nothing but changes a lot. Because every time you say "stop, don't touch that" to a child who's just spotted your china cabinet, you're burning through their cooperation reserves. Move the china. Make the house work for the visit, not against it. And then you're not the person saying no every 5 minutes. You're the person they associate with play and warmth, with 0 friction. A key tip for grandparents is to engage in compassionate listening with the parents. There will be times when parents want to vent about difficulties they're having with the kids, and as grandparents, the urge is to provide advice on how to manage them. Resist that urge, at least initially. Listen first. The parent who feels heard by their own parent is far more likely to be flexible about the small things, the extra bedtime story, the extra cookie, because they trust that the big things will be respected. A large UK study of 1,515 secondary school students found that greater grandparent involvement with families was associated with significantly fewer emotional problems and significantly more kind and helpful behavior among children. Read that again. More grandparent involvement, fewer emotional problems, more kindness, more helpfulness. The data is unambiguous on this. Grandparents are not a complication in a child's emotional life. They're a resource. A powerful, irreplaceable resource. The meltdowns aren't proof that the relationship is broken. They're a side effect of the relationship being real. Research has found that grandparent-grandchild relational closeness is significantly associated with lower odds of children having emotional symptoms, conduct problems, peer problems, and abnormal prosocial behaviors. So closeness protects children. Closeness, not discipline, not rule enforcement, not structured screen time. Closeness, the relationship you're building every single visit, even the messy ones with the crying. And the refusals and the sugar crashes is doing something for that child that no other relationship can replicate. Grandparents are important members of a child's microsystem. And their parenting styles and interactions with other members of the system affect the child's development in ways that reach far beyond any single visit. Far beyond any single visit. The child on your floor crying over juice is going to grow up. They're going to carry this relationship with them. The safety they feel at your house, even when it's the thing that unlocks their worst behavior, that safety is part of how they learn. That the world is survivable. That adults can be trusted. That love doesn't come with conditions attached. This attachment isn't negative. It reflects the important supportive role grandparents play in a child's emotional development. The meltdown isn't your failure. It's your grandchild trusting you, with the parts of themselves they can't show anywhere else. That's not a problem to fix. That's the